Our last, but certainly not least, reader for the night is the famous and infamous Mr. Robert J. Sawyer. He has been called the Dean of Canadian Science Fiction by the Ottawa Citizen and just about the best science fiction writer out there these days by the Denver Rocky Mountain News. He's one of only 7 writers in history and the only Canadian to win all 3 of the science fiction field's top honors for Best Novel of the Year. The World Science Fiction Society's Hugo Award, which he got in 2003 for his novel Hominids. The Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America's Nebula Award, which he won in '96 for his novel The Terminal Experiment, and the John W. Campbell Memorial Award, which he won in 2006 for his novel Mind Scan. Rob is also the only writer in history to win the top SF awards in the United States, United States, China, Japan, France, and Spain. Rob, talk to me when you've conquered Estonia. In addition, he's won an Arthur Ellis Award for the Crime Writers from the Crime Writers of Canada, as well as 10 Auroras. The ABC TV series Flash Forward is based on his novel of the same name, and before I forget, his book launch for his next book, Wonder, the 3rd in the WWW series, will be launching on Tuesday, March 29th at 7 p.m. There are flyers at the back of the table, so check it out. Without further ado, the one, the only, Robert J. Sawyer.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. My very first publication was in the Literary Annual of Ryerson Polytechnical Institute, edited by Ed Greenwood. He started my career, 1980. But that was fantasy, and I don't do fantasy anymore. I only do science fiction. And it's 30 years ago, about 2 weeks ago, that my first science fiction story was published. And since I worked at Bakka an awfully long time ago, 29 years ago I worked at Bakka, when Peter Hollis was just a lad of 31, I thought I would read some stuff that dates back to that era. And I'm going to start with that story. This is a little before I worked at Bakka. It came out in 1981, 30 years ago. It's only 250 words long. I used to have it on the back of my business card. It's called If I'm Here, Imagine Where They Sent My Luggage, and it appeared in the Village Voice, the weekly newspaper of New York. One look at the eyes of that allosaur had been enough. Fiery red with anger, darting with hunger, and a deeper glow of cunning. Those sickle claws might be great for shredding prey, but he can't run worth a damn on mud. Come on, Allo baby, you may have the armament, but I took Paleo 250 with Professor Blackheart. Damn the professor anyway. If it weren't for his class, I'd be on Altair 3 now, not running for my life across a prehistoric mudflat. Those idiots at Starport, Toronto said teleportation was a safe way to travel. Just concentrate on your destination and the jump link belt will do the rest. Ha! I was concentrating, but when I saw that fat broad, I couldn't help thinking of a brontosaur. So I let my mind wander for half a second. The jump link belt still shouldn't have dumped me here with the dinosaurs. There should be enough juice left for one more jump, if I can get it to work. Damn, it's hard fiddling with your belt buckle while doing a 3-minute kilometer. Let's see, if I reroute those fiber optics through that pico processor, the thwack thwack of clawed feet sucking out of mud is getting closer. Got to hurry. Thwack thwack. There, the timer's voice counts down. 4. Concentrate on Starport, Toronto. Concentrate. Thwack thwack. 3. Toronto, the Starport. Concentrate. Thwack thwack. 2. Concentrate hard. Starport, Toronto. No stray thoughts. Thwack thwack. 1. Boy, am I going to give them hell. Thank you. I gotta say, it always creeps me out to go to things that ChiZine does, because they always insist on putting up Dave Nichols' author photo on the photos, on the posters here. And I really gotta say, Dave, the beard is well advised, so keep it, my friend, keep it. This one I actually wrote when I worked at Bakka in the summer of 1982. John Robert Colombo, who co-edited Tesseract's 14 with Brent Alexander Savory, recently, way back then, did a piece for Leisure Ways, the magazine of the Canadian Automobile Association, where he got 3 up-and-coming Canadian science fiction writers to do little shorts about the future of Toronto. And I did one. Terrence M. Green, who went on to be a two-time World Fantasy Award finalist, did another. And Andrew Weiner, who in the 80s and 90s was a mainstay of Asimov's and FNSF, did the third. And here's mine. It's called Ours to Discover, which was a play on the then new Yours to Discover license plate slogan for Ontario. Old Man Withers was crazy. Everybody said so. Everybody but that boy Eric. Mr. Withers is an archaeologist, Eric would say. Whatever an archaeologist might be. Remember that funny blue and white sweater Withers found? He claimed he could look at the markings on it and hear the words Toronto Maple Leafs in his head. Oh, Toronto was the name of our steel dome city, of course, so I believed that much. But I'd never heard of a maple leaf before. The same maple leaf symbol was in the center of all those old flags people kept finding in the ruins. Some thought a maple leaf must have been a horrendous beast like a moose or a beaver or a Trudeau. Others thought it was a kind of crystal, but crystals make people think of rocks and uranium and bombs, and well, those are hardly topics for polite conversation. Eric wanted to know for sure. He came around to the museum and said, "Please, Mr. Curator, help me find out what a maple leaf is." Truth to tell, I wasn't the real curator. I'd moved into the museum, or ROM, as some called it, because it was such a nice building. No one ever used it after all, and with so few of us under the dome, you could live just about anywhere you chose. Well, we looked, but Eric and I didn't have any luck finding a real maple leaf among the few intact exhibits. "It must have been something very special," Eric said. "It must have meant something to our ancestors back when times were good." He looked up at me with innocent eyes. "If we could find out what a maple leaf was, maybe times would be good again." Who was I to tell him he was dreaming? "You've looked everywhere there is to look. We haven't looked outside of the dome." "Outside? There's nothing outside, lad." "There has to be." "Why? I've never heard such nonsense." "There just has to be, that's all." Well, you can't argue with that kind of logic. "Even if there is," I said, "there's no way to go outside, so that's that." "Yes, there is," said Eric. "Mr. Withers found a door way up in North York. It's all rusted shut. If we took some of the tools from here, we might be able to open it." Well, the boy insisted on going, and I couldn't let him hike all that way alone, could I? We set out the next day. It had been years since I'd been to Dome's Edge. They call it Steele's Avenue up there, which seemed an appropriate name for where the Iron Dome touched the ground. Sure enough, there was a door. I felt sure somebody would have had the good sense to jam it closed, so I didn't worry when I gave it a healthy pry with a crowbar. Damned if the thing didn't pop right open. We stepped cautiously through. There was magic out there. A huge ball of light hung up over our heads. Tall and proud brown columns stretched as far as the eye could see. On top they were like frozen fire, orange and red, yellow. Little things were flying to and fro, and they were singing. Suddenly Eric fell to his knees. "Look, Mr. Curator, maple leaves." There were millions of them covering the ground. More fluttered down from above, thin and veined and beautiful. Eric looked up at me. This must have been what it was like when times were good. People living outside with the maple leaves. "I think we should live out here, Mr. Curator." I laughed and cried and hugged the boy. We turned our backs on the dome and marched forward. When it came time to fly a flag over our new town, everyone agreed it should be the maple leaf forever. Thank you. I double dipped on that because I got paid for the story and John Rose paid me for the time while I was working at the store when I wrote it. That's the way to make a living as a writer. This is a piece I did actually 3 years ago now, for the Globe and Mail's Report on Business magazine. I made my living for a long time as a non-fiction writer, and Report on Business magazine was one of the standard places I wrote for. And when I became a science fiction writer, they came to me and said, why don't you do something science fictional for us? And I did a piece that I called Emails from the Future, and it consists of 3 emails sent to me by my agent. Now, this is a little bittersweet because my agent, Ralph Ichinazzo, who's a great, great literary agent who I owe a lot of my success to, passed away recently and suddenly from an aneurysm, completely unexpectedly. He is not the agent in this story, but he does have some of the characteristics. Begins with a header. MS Googly Who email. Inbox. To Robert J. Sawyer from Big Name Author Multimedia Agency. Date February 14, 2018, 9:31 a.m. EST. Subject going, gone. Rob, baby, happy Valentine's Day. Oh, wait, got that wavy purple underline in Word. Intellectual property problem. Let me correct that. Happy FedEx Valentine's Day, when your love absolutely, positively has to be there overnight. Seriously, speaking of sponsorship, we're closing the bidding in 2 hours on the beverage product placements in your next novel. Please don't give me a hassle this time, okay, Rob? That I'm an artiste stuff is so last millennia. I don't care if the character is the kind of guy who'd only drink fine wine. If you want to drink anything that isn't rot gut, you'll do it my way. I'm pretty sure Coke is going to take the Canadian rights, but Pepsi in the US is hot on science fiction right now, what with their billboard on the side of the International Space Station. So I suspect they'll be the high bidder here. And just be happy that Coke and Pepsi haven't merged yet. Monopolies mean only one bid. And yeah, I know Pepsi pays in US dollars, but hey, they're still worth something down here, even if they don't go very far up in Toronto. And believe me, I'm barely keeping body and soul together with the paltry 40% commission I'm charging you. What's the greenback worth now? 45 cents Canadian? I swear, someday we'll get out of this Iraq quagmire. And don't even get me started on what we're doing in Colombia. Anyway, keep that BlackBerry implant of yours turned on, baby. I'll have more news soon. Your pal in the Big Apple, trademark, all rights reserved, Jock. And then he has a little signature quote. Intellectual property has the shelf life of a banana. Bill Gates. To Robert J. Sawyer from Big Name Author Multimedia Agency, date February 14, 2018, 11:42 a.m. EST. Subject, your book is all wet. Color me surprised, or maybe that should be color with a U. You guys still doing that U thing? You do know the NORAM Economic Union is going to standardize spelling soon, right? Anyway, Ontario Clean Water Inc. outbid Pepsi for the US rights. All the characters in your next novel are going to be kicking back cool, clear Canadian H2O, the best that money can buy, as we New Yorkers know well. Hey, speaking of Canada, I wish I'd bought Canadian biotech stocks 10 years ago. You guys are going through the roof. Who'd have thunk that the United States would fall so far behind? But I guess when you stop teaching evolution in the schools, you end up with no competent life scientists. And when you ban stem cell research and all that, well, it's no surprise that someone else is picking up the slack. And on the topic of Canuck ingenuity, man, I love that lawsuit you guys have brought in the World Court, seeking a royalty on compasses because the magnetic North Pole is in Canada. Doing that takes Timbits. Still, I guess if it's possible to claim ownership of parts of the human genome, and all sorts of companies do, you should be able to do the same with other natural phenomena, no? I suppose I'm not the first to suggest that if you win the case, the royalty will come to be known as the poll tax. Your taxing representation, Jock. Another SIG quote. Software licenses are perhaps the only product besides half-eaten food, underwear, and toothbrushes which can't be resold. Computer scientist, Jordan Polak. And here's the final message. To Robert J. Sawyer from Big Name Author Multimedia Agency, date February 14, 2018, 12:02 p.m. EST. Subject, and speaking of taxes, I always forget about taxes when thinking about life up there in the great green now in a lot of places north. I saw that piece on the Globe Sun Star site. Hey, remember printed newspapers? Man, I'm showing my age. About your Tax Freedom Day now coming so late in the year that it coincides with your Thanksgiving. Guess that finally gives you guys a real reason to celebrate that holiday, you pilgrimless plagiarists, you. Hey, maybe we should launch a lawsuit, an intellectual property suit over that. I mean, maybe McWendy's should. It's their holiday now. Yours in literature, Jock. P.S. By the way, did I ever tell you how much I love the new novel? Man, if it were still possible to get people to actually buy intellectual property instead of copying it for free, I bet we could have sold a ton. Ah, well, at least you've got the Canada Council for the Arts up there until it gets outlawed as an unfair subsidy. And I know its juries love science fiction. Don't they? Hey, shouldn't I be getting a cut of your grants? No, Rob, put that meat cleaver down. And there's a final SIG quote. If you cannot protect what you own, you don't own anything. Jack Valenti, president of the defunct Motion Picture Association of America. And where's Brett? Brett Savory, where are you? Hiding. There he is. Brett and John Robert Colombo edited Tesseracts 14. I come from an esteemed family of poets with Carolyn Klink, my wife, and David Klink, my brother-in-law. And this is my one and only attempt at a kind of prose poem thing. And it's the concluding piece in Tesseracts 14. It's the concluding piece of my set of readings, and it's the concluding piece of tonight's program, a little piece called The Transformed Man. Space. The final frontier. I used to be called Robin, but when I was 10, I discovered my legal name was Robert, so I switched. I was tired of getting invitations to join girls' skating teams. Back then, Mississauga was farmland. Now, I live in a high-rise there, but you can still see one farm out of my window. The guy refuses to sell. We science fiction writers talk a lot about the singularity, a coming moment during which the rate of technological progress will asymptotically approach infinity and whoosh, plain old human beings will be left far behind. Charles Stross, a writer I know, calls this the rapture of the nerds. Charlie has recently started shaving his head. On an early episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, guest star Stanley Camill was supposed to say the word asymptotically, but he'd never heard of it. So he said asymptomatically instead. He died recently of a heart attack. He'd had no previous signs of heart disease. My favorite movie is 2001, A Space Odyssey. Arthur C. Clarke died recently too. He lived long enough to see the actual 2001 come and go with none of the miracles he portrayed becoming reality. My editor claims science fiction writers should never put dates in their books. The future has a way of catching up with you, he says. He has a PhD in comparative medieval literature. So he should know. Battlestar Galactica used to be camp. Now it's serious. Ditto Batman. The presidency of the United States used to be serious. Now it's camp. They remade Planet of the Apes. They shouldn't have. Computers, the ultimate tools. I did a talk recently in Second Life. My name in that virtual world is SF Writer. I have hair there. SF Writer is also my license plate, but I don't drive. When I talk about the plate, I say, "Oh, the car vanity!" People younger than me don't get the pun. My Canada includes Quebec, but its license plates no longer call it La Belle Province. I can't remember what they say now. I went to the Yukon in the summer of 2007 on a writing retreat at Pierre Burton's old house. It had been renovated the previous winter by the designer guys. They put diaphanous curtains on the windows. Dawson gets 21 hours of daylight in the summer. But the designer guys hadn't thought about that. I got to see the northern lights, the aurora changes, moment by moment. Biotech, the last challenge. My father sold his vacation home last year. He'd had it since 1974. It was time, he said. I'd lost my virginity there. When I turned 40, I had a vasectomy. The Ontario Health Insurance Plan will pay for your vasectomy and pay to have it reversed and pay to give you another vasectomy, but they won't pay to have that one reversed because, you know, that'd be frivolous. I've had all my amalgam fillings replaced. What were they thinking? Putting mercury in people's mouths. I got my degree in radio and television arts in 1982. I can edit audio tape with a razor blade. When I went to Ryerson, it was called Ryerson Polytechnical Institute. Then it became Ryerson Polytechnic University. Now it's Ryerson University. But people still call it Rye High. After I graduated, Ryerson hired me to help teach TV production. My salary was $14,400 a year. Even then, it wasn't much. $6 million used to be a lot of money, though. You could buy a cyborg with it. But the bionic woman didn't cost quite $6 million. After all, said her boss, her parts were smaller. He always called her Babe. I cringe when women today refer to themselves as girls. In the summer of 1980, I lived in Waterloo. The people I hung out with there always called Fisher-Hallman Road Fisher Hall Person. No one does stuff like that anymore. Still, interstellar space used to be where no man has gone before. Now, it's where no one has gone before. William Shatner's 1968 debut album, on which he mangles Lucy in the sky with diamonds, is called The Transformed Man. He won Emmy Awards for Best Supporting Actor in 2004 and 2005 and was nominated again last year. Nanotech, the next big thing. Ingrid Bergman calls Dooley Wilson boy in Casablanca, and nobody cringes. The year I was born, Robert was the 5th most popular boy's name. Now, it's number 47. Robin has never cracked the top 100. My first freelance writing job was editing the CRTC license application for what became Vision TV, Canada's multi-faith television channel. Back then, we called it the Canadian Interfaith Network, or CIN, with a soft C. Sin. That pissed some people off. Used to be my books were shelved in stores next to those by Hilbert Schenck. Hilbert has disappeared. I have no idea what happened to him. NASA has a sister organization called NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The acronym is pronounced NOAA. A government agency couldn't get away with a biblical pun like that today, but everyone wants to know about the faith lives of presidential candidates. Joe Biden is the first ever Roman Catholic to become Veep. Tempus Fugit. Here in Canada, we used to have Pierre Trudeau's. Now, we have Stephen Harper's. I collect plastic dinosaurs. My one criteria, they must have been accurate portrayals at the time they were made. Brontosaurus used to drag its tail. It doesn't now, and it's no longer Brontosaurus. Oh, and Pluto used to be a planet. It isn't anymore. Someday, the same thing will be said of Earth. Thank you.